individual. I read somewhere where, I don't know whether or not this is a hadith, because I read only English. But this is, I read this, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah said that the son of Adam, if he seeks the dunya, Allah will fill his hands with poverty, and he only sees poverty, as opposed to the one who seeks the hereafter. Are you familiar with this?
Tayyib. There's no doubt about that. That's mentioned in authentic hadith about the one who seeks the dunya, or one who makes the hereafter his goal. Atathu dunya wa hiya raghima. The worldly life comes to him and he doesn't really, he's not concerned about it. And the one who seeks the dunya and who wants wealth and a status, his poverty will be placed in front of him. There's no doubt about that. And his mind will be split up instead of being focused and concentrated. That's in sound hadiths. No doubt about that. That wording, and let alone other hadiths. Wallahu ta'ala alam. You had other questions, Sheikh?
There's another question. I heard this saying here. This saying is by Ali, who said that if poverty was a man, that he would kill it. Have you heard something like that?
Those statements are known. The concept of giving sadaqah and removing the people from having that need. Everyone isn't going to be rich. Everyone isn't going to be noble. Allah clearly declared that He has given virtue, He's given precedence to some people over others. That's how things were and will always be. But there should be a standard of living in this country. And a ruler should pride himself. No one in my country goes to sleep hungry at night. Who can say that? Nobody is hungry in my land. Nobody. Not one person. I can boast. I can stick out my chest and say that. Not too many rulers can say that today. Everybody's not going to eat filet mignon at night. Everyone is going to have a whole, shrimp and lobster. But at least every person has some bread and some water and some milk. No one should go to sleep with that pain of hunger bothering them, rattling them before, or tossing and turning in the bed. Right? So the concept of abolishing and obliterating that type of poverty. Everyone being noble, being rich and wealthy is impossible. And all systems that have tried to do that have failed, as we've seen in history. But it shouldn't be a person living in a high-rise palace, golden spoons, sterling silver teapots, and then people, you can just drive down the street, huh? Not hidden, not you got to go, but you can just drive down the street and see people starving, hungry, begging. Something is what? Extremely wrong. Of course, obviously, poverty, homelessness is a big problem. The government oftentimes, even here, they provide things, they provide services. Some people choose to live on the streets, but you get the point. And which the attitude is, we got to clean this up. You guys can't be out here. You guys, and if for argument's sake, as you see the poor people, then you see the place that's providing the food. The soup kitchen is right there. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Have fun.
No. Probably more.
Is there anything stating that from Quran or Hadith that the Masjid must be open 24 hours or cannot be closed? Any statements from the Prophet?
Right. That the Masjid cannot be closed or should be open 24/7, so on and so forth. Any statements from the Prophet, etc. The Masjid is the house of Allah. And how the masjids are now is a little different than how the masjids were in the time of the Prophet. Okay, many things, not all things, but there are many things that's very hard to translate. Okay, people, they're crazed nowadays talking about the rulers, this one, that one, etc. Did the Salaf al-Salih, did they live in this situation in which we live? Was it even fathomable and imaginable for multitudes of Muslims living in lands under the authority and the protection of kuffar and mushrikun? Could they even think about that? So oftentimes it's hard to even put the square shape into the triangular, it just won't fit. How masjids are made, the size, who owns it, renting a masjid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, versus how it was what? Night and day. One person locking the door. The masjid gets shut down. The masjid is paying rent. The masjid is a house. It used to be versus building it from the ground up. Or it used to be a church or a cathedral, et cetera. It used to be a temple, et cetera, et cetera. So some things are very hard to make a parallel out of, is the point I'm trying to get to. All right, and many examples like this when it comes to dawah, and I'll say it briefly, is that many people, they're confused. They're confused, huh? And we say to the confused person, just take it easy. Relax, mahlan, sit down, we'll give you some tea, relax, just chill. Don't start talking about this and that, just relax because you are clearly confused. You don't know what you're talking about. You think you do, but you don't. So dawah, hijrah, Muslim minorities, Islamic leadership, etc. So much stuff that was just unthinkable 200 years ago. Let alone 500 years ago, let alone in the time of the Sahaba and the Salaf, let alone in the time of the Prophet. It just didn't exist. The Muslims living like this in this state. This is the person in charge of the masjid. These are the people with their hands on the masjid, controlling the imam, etc. It was impossible to think about. You get the point I'm trying to make? Any Tom, Dick, and Harry, this and that, can't even be thought of. So oftentimes it's hard to find that parallel. You get what I'm trying to say? So at the end of the day, the masjid is the house of Allah. It shouldn't be owned by one person. It shouldn't be monopolized by one person. And it should be open based off of the needs of the believers. People need to pray. People need to make salah. Cab drivers, etc., etc., etc. And obviously security is an issue. People on drugs, alcohol, stealing, that's an issue. If it was up to me, the masjid will be open 24/7. Somebody will be watching or on post, whatever the case may be, if it was up to me. What does the Prophet ﷺ say about that being open 24/7? I don't know of any specific hadith. I don't know of one in which the Prophet ﷺ spoke on that specifically. If someone knows of it, please mention it to us. But in general, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ prohibited people from stopping people from going to the masjid. Okay? And from that, one can say is that the masjid should be accessible. Wallahu ta'ala. And of course, that's going to be based off of the situation. And Allah knows best. Hopefully that's some help to your question. Shay'un, laysa kathiran. Question is coming from Harlem. Initials BA. Next question. AF from Minneapolis. What should I study while completing the Quran after Aqidah and Tawheed? If you're trying to be a serious, full-time, professional student of knowledge, then you have to learn all of the Islamic sciences. The auxiliary sciences and the sciences that you actually intend to study for the rest of your life. We've done many courses on how to become a serious student of knowledge, how to be a serious student of knowledge, how to remain a serious student of knowledge. Please check out those courses, and you can find all of them on our websites. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Next question says, coming from Long Island, initials UH. How do you truly love a brother for the sake of Allah? If you visit someone, food is usually offered. It's very simple. The initial purpose, the primary purpose, is loving, seeking the face of Allah. But it doesn't mean that you're not a human being. And it doesn't mean that good food isn't an incentive. I love you for Allah's sake, and I know that the what?
The wife can cook.
No doubt, it's going to be crazy. Know what I'm saying? The food, the sweets, the coffee is going to be what? Crazy. Fulan, mashallah, his household, they don't play. She's a scholar in the kitchen. He's a scholar in the kitchen. There's nothing wrong with that. You're a human being. That can be an incentive. But that shouldn't be the what? The primary reason. So ikhlas, sincerity. If a poor Muslim invites you over his house, there's nothing to stop you. You're free. You're supposed to say what? I'm coming. He's poor, he's dirty. Look at his socks and smell his feet. I already know he don't have that much money. I already know the food is, you're supposed to what? You're supposed to go. A wealthy brother with a suit and a tie, You know what type of car he's driving. You know what type of business he has. You know he's a serious, doctor, surgeon. He invites you, you take his invitation. Not just off of the dunya. Black person, white person, yellow person, red person. Right? We spoke about this. Blind. Put a blindfold on. Accepting the walima. We spoke on this. That's what's meant by that. But it doesn't mean that Allah won't bless you with things. And the sunnah of Allah is that when you take care of your deen, Allah will bless you in the dunya as well. That's a fact. That's a solid fact. You take care of the deen, you'll get this. Allah will bless you with that. And if you don't take care of the deen, you lose out on both worlds in most cases. For real, for real. If our children only what? Only but knew. Moving forward. Question is coming from UH from Long Island. Is it a bid'ah to do a group dua in general after salah, after Jummah, etc.? To continually do a group supplication, no question, is not from the sunnah. A fact. It's an undisputed fact. Indisputable fact. You did it once, one thing. Generalities of making dua together, Musa and Harun, etc. Hilak al-dhikr. But you keep doing it every time. You make it formal. As soon as the Imam salams out, Salli ala Muhammad, no doubt about that. This is bid'ah. La shak fi dhalik. If you did it once, if it happened, one brother made dua and the other brother said Ameen, they raised their hands, mumkin. So we have to understand is that there are principles for when an act becomes a bid'ah. And no doubt about it, from the greatest acts of worship is dua. No doubt about that. Ad-du'a huwa al-ibadah. Ad-du'a mukh al-ibadah. The core of worship, the bone marrow of the deen is dua. What better thing to do? And what better thing to do except make dua in the company of the Muslims? But you putting it like this, like that, every time, say the same thing over and over again. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ never instructed you to do that. So that becomes bid'ah idafiyah, one of the types of bid'ah. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Regardless of who allowed it, Imam Fulan at this university, they've been doing it there in Egypt or Syria for it doesn't. It's proven in Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, Malik. If it's not proven there, it matters not what mufti or qadi said, it's okay. And that is what Islam is. Islam is not a man's whims or desires, what he thinks and feels. And of course, there are issues of ijtihad, of course. There are issues in which the scholars differ. And there's a basis to the act. We don't go in any what? Extreme. Naam. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Question says, AS from London, UK. Assalamu alaikum, Mufti. I feel I'm too specific with preference of race when it comes to marriage. I'm afraid that what I'm looking for will be extremely hard to find. What's important is, you got to do what you feel you need to do. If you feel that you need a spouse, husband or wife, whatever, of a specific race, that's what you need. If you feel like that's a preference but not a must, and if she or he has the other needed qualities, bismillah. So it depends. Is race fard or sunnah? If you consider it fard, I have to have a wife that's Indonesian like me. I have to. I'm sorry, I just can't. Then that's what you need to stick with. I would prefer an Indonesian wife, but if she's not Indonesian, if she comes from Albania, then mashallah. It's just that simple. You have to make that decision yourself. And obviously, you have to look at time that passes. Have you found this perfect husband and this perfect wife yet of this race? You have to ask yourself that question. UH from Long Island, I want to join your exclusive class on the last Thursday of this month. I couldn't find it on the shop. May Allah reward you and continue to be a means of a beacon of light. Jazakallah khairan. It's there. To my knowledge, it's there. The 29th of December, the last Thursday of this month, will be Pray, as you have seen me praying, part 3, 9:30 p.m. on HadithDisciple shop. I don't know why you can't find it. If it isn't there, or if you're having a problem with the link, please reach out to us in an email, and we'll try to make sure that we get you the link to sign up. Whatever the case is, don't worry. The link will be there. You'll have time to purchase the lecture, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum. This was AA from DC. Can you please explain the obligation and importance of sending salutations upon the Prophet ﷺ? when mentioning or hearing his name mentioned. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Barakallahu feek, fikum barakallah, wa alaikum salam wa barakatuh. It's paying off a debt. The Prophet has done so much for you, giving you so much. It's only right that you pay off that debt. And from the debt, or paying off that debt, repaying that debt, is saying, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Whenever his name is mentioned, you give him his regard, his respect. You manifest your love. And you ask Allah to raise his name higher and higher and higher and higher. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. KB, Cary, North Carolina. Just want to say thank you, Sheikh, for all that you do. Your advice and classes are such a benefit. Also, everyone sign up for the monthly call. It's extremely beneficial. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you very much. May Allah bless you. And may Allah make us better than what you think of us. AS from London, UK. Is divorce the most hated permissible act in the sight of Allah? That hadith is weak. There's not an authentic hadith that states that. There is an authentic hadith in Sahih Muslim, the hadith of Jabir, with regards to the shaitan placing his throne upon water. And every morning he sends out his stoops to cause havoc, to reap havoc, mayhem among the servants of Allah. And they return seeking a reward with their master. I did this, I did that. I made this, I made that. And the shaitan will say, Ma sana'ta shay'an. You didn't do anything. They'll make up. Get up, go. Go back out to the streets. Your collection bag isn't what? Big enough. You're not a good earner, basically. Until one demon comes and he says, I kept whispering, I kept inciting them. Think about this now, guys. The shaitan whispering, destroying your marriage. I kept making problems. I kept irritating and agitating. And most importantly, or not necessarily most importantly, but think about it, the shaitan, the demon, I kept using the men, the shayateen from the humans, to spew venom on your marriage. This one, that one, fulan, sister such and such. Oh, she said such and such. And oh, she's texting, Assalamu alaikum, sister such and such, and brother such and such. Think about the human beings who appear friendly, and only Allah knows that they behind those soft paws are what? Sharp nails, jealous that your household is intact. Your wife is not complaining and crying and homeless and hungry and this and that. I'm divorced. My husband treats me like trash. This and that. So she sees that. Don't think that she's not watching. MashaAllah, you came to Jumu'ah with your wife. Everybody's happy. The kids are happy. They have that hasad. And the next thing you know, Assalamu alaikum, MashaAllah, Alhamdulillah. And then you lend your ear and they start, the venoms, more. Or brother who's jealous and envious that you have the type of wife that you have and he never had, right? And then he starts saying stuff about you. You need to man up. You need to toughen up. Oh, you need to such and such. Or you need to such and such. That's all from those shayateen. Until, bang, marriage is ruined. The animosity is planted. And when that demon does that, the shaitan will tell him to come closer. And he'll say, Ni'ma anta. You're excellent. You did very well. And he will reward him and honor him. So that's an authentic hadith clearly showing that the shaitan loves divorce. And in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions about the Yahud, وَاتَّبِعُوا, that they followed the teachings of sorcery and the angels that were sent down, right? عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانُ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا. And from that which they learn of sihr, يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ. And that's deep if you think about it. Allah didn't mention murder, bloodshed, miscarriages. Allah didn't mention wars. Allah mentioned only one thing from that which they learn is that they split a man up from his woman. Think about that. Why Allah mentioned that? Think about that now. Think of all the evils that sin can cause. Someone becoming sick. Someone dying. But Allah didn't what? He didn't mention that. He mentioned from the havoc and the mayhem that they cause is that they cause a man to be separated from his woman, not even his wife, his partner, his wife. All right. So the moral of the story is that in general, divorce, which is unwarranted, is beloved to shaitan and to the shayateen. That's in the Quran and what? Authentic hadith. In general, unwarranted what? Divorce. As far as the divorce that's correct or proper or has a reason, no one can come along and say that's hated by Allah. And that is the most hated act that's lawful. Allah doesn't make something lawful that He hates. And obviously the scholars of Islam, they differ on that hadith, its authenticity, etc. What's important is the hadith is ghayr sahih. And the Prophet never said that. Inna abghad al-halali ilallahi talaq. The most hated lawful thing to Allah is the divorce. La, abadan. Hada munkar. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Next question is saying, AS from Toronto, Canada. Is it true that sins deprive one of substance, or sustenance is supposed to be, and answer du'as? If so, does this apply to repentant ones? Can you still be affected by sins you repented from? The answer is yes in general. But once you make tawbah, you have no sin. If you made a correct tawbah. Can you still be affected by sins? With the humans, yes. Your name, your past, what you used to be into, your lifestyle, this disease that you acquired out in the dunya. Alhamdulillah, you made tawbah, but you still what? You still got the disease. You made tawbah, but you're in jail. You made tawbah, but you lost your child in the process, or whatever the case may be. But with the law, once you make a sincere tawbah, correct tawbah, inshallah, clean slate. Wallahu ta'ala alam. EA, Valenciennes, France. How to apply Aqidah and Tawheed on a daily basis so that what we learn in these topics are not just academic science. We have rather a real way of life. Focus on Allah's names and attributes and apply them, those which can be applied in your daily life. KM from DC. Would like to know, can you say in your own language whatever you want outside of the Fatiha? The prayer, in my humble opinion, should only consist of the Arabic language. No other language should be mentioned in the salah, period. The dua that you want to make to Allah in your language, that's fine. I would prefer for that to be mentioned outside of the prayer. Fard prayer and sunnah. And once you open up the door of foreign languages in the prayer, in most cases the door will never ever shut. He'll make a dua in this language, and then he'll say this in this language, and then the next thing you know, it's what? It's just a flood. Let alone the fact that there's so many supplications of the Prophet in the original language that cover what you need to ask him for. But if you need to make a specific dua, it's no problem making it in English or another language, but it should be outside of the prayer, in my humble opinion. And if not, if you want it to be in the prayer, then my humble opinion, it should be in the sunnah prayer, not the fard. As far as the recitation, of course not. Nothing but the kalam of Allah and the Quran al-Kareem, the recitation of the Quran. Wallahu ta'ala alam. AH from Singapore. Where at from Singapore? Jazakallahu khairan. KM, Charlotte, North Carolina. Can you make supplication in salah in your native? Next question. UH from Long Island. Is the greatest act of worship on Friday sending salah on the Prophet other than the obligations? Is it better than reading Surah Al-Kahf? Sending prayers upon the Prophet ﷺ over and over again isn't fard. And many scholars, they differ and they debate on what's fard from saying ﷺ once in your lifetime, every time in your prayer, etc. And the tashahhud, etc. What's important is saying sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, all of his virtues is not the highest and the best thing to do on the day of Jumu'ah. Let alone it being the biggest obligation on Jumu'ah. Allah Azza wa Jalla truly knows best. SM from Melbourne, Australia. Assalamu alaikum mufti. What are some of the Islamic procedures and medicines to cure arthritis? Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. First and foremost is, one of the greatest principles of Islam is prevention. Prevention. So try your best to do that which you can to prevent arthritis. Your foods, your drinks, your sleeping habits, your whatever that you need that prevents arthritis. That's first and foremost. Secondly, we have to understand is that there are many practices which are called Islamic with regards to medicine and healing, which are Arabian. And it's not necessarily spiritual. There are things that the Arabs did, and the Prophet was an Arab. It was not prohibited. And this is how the Arabs cured this type of sickness or illness. And it doesn't mean that that is a spiritual Islamic cure. And there are other things that the Prophet did and said and taught the Sahaba about that the Arabs did that Islam acknowledged, and it was spiritual. And there's a barakah in it, and shifa in it, and Allah says this about it. So the medicine of the Prophet, as we have explained before, is of two types. Everything that's mentioned of the Prophet did is not spiritual, medicinal practice. Doesn't mean that. Be careful. There are things that the Arabs had learned from the Abyssinians, from the Greeks, from the Romans, from the Persians, and it wasn't something that Allah sent down a verse about, or the Prophet spoke about its barakah, and how Allah played it. It's just medicine that was known to them. Effective and nowadays or not. Okay? So what I would advise you with is prevention. And I would advise you to make a lot of dua. In my personal opinion, with regards to arthritis or any disease, diabetes, whatever the case may be, is to combine between the East and the West, the old school and the new school. The spiritual aspect and the tangible material aspect of seeking cure. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Next question says, it's coming from New Zealand, which city or province? UH, Long Island. I heard the Sunnah to say Allahumma barak instead of mashallah, and that you should say mashallah for yourself, like Surah Kaf, like the man with the garden. What's important is you mention Allah's name, and you be moderate in your praise and your amazement. You mention Allah's name for barakah, for protection, and you fight hasad, and you're moderate in your praise and your amazement. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Tayyib. Our last question tonight, or maybe a few, last three. One is from Glasgow, UK, initials AG. With kafarat yameen, what qualifies someone as miskeen? Is there a certain criterion that seeing someone on the street who looks poor and feeding them fulfill the expiation? There are things which are agreed upon, which makes a person miskeen. And there are things on which the scholars of Islam from the Sahaba on up differ on. What is the minimum or the maximum? What makes a person miskeen? And inshallah ta'ala, Allah knows best. In most cases, it's going to be based off of culture. One of the 5 major fiqh maxims, and then adata muhakkama. The custom of the people is the judge when there's no specific evidence for it. So the people consider it to be miskeen is going to be miskeen. Whether he finds half of his needs or less than half of his needs. And some scholars say that the miskeen is the one who works but is still needy, like Surah Kaf. They were working at sea, at the ports, on the ships, and they were still masakin. Versus the faqir, who's totally destitute, nothing in his hands. Wallahu ta'ala. So if you see someone on the street and they fall under that, then that's one thing. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Questions coming from Long Island, issues UH. Ruling on using weak hadiths for a'mal. That's a long discussion. The scholars who allow it, they say is that there are conditions. And they don't just open it up. To use weak hadiths for fada'il al-a'mal, virtuous deeds, number one, the hadith cannot be extremely weak. It can only be slightly weak. It cannot be fabricated or something that is munkar. Number two, وَأَنْ يَنْدَرِجَ تَحْتَ أَصْلٍ عَامٍ, is that it must fall under a generality of other valid authentic proofs. Number three, أَنْ لَا يَعْتَقِدْ صِحَّةْ نِسْبَتِهِ إِلَى النَّبِي صلى الله عليه وسلم, is not to believe that it specifically is attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, right? And in other scholars, they say, Kalla, on the contrary, nay. You can't use it at all. There's enough Sahih hadiths, and it's impossible to act upon those 3 conditions. And once a person hears a hadith of this reward, they're going to act upon it. And the average person has no knowledge of authenticity. The scholars today, many years, many centuries, lost the understanding of Sahih and Da'if, let alone Tom, Dick, and Harry on the streets. They don't understand Sahih and Da'if. The Prophet said, he who makes this dua will receive 1,000 hasanat and Allah will forgive him for 20 years. Khalas. They have no clue. They have no cognizance. So that's a technical discussion among the ulama of Islam. Some say yes, some say no. Those who do allow the usage of weak hadiths for only virtuous deeds, not fiqh or tawheed or aqidah, but virtuous acts, those are the conditions that they what? That they place upon those hadiths. And never to say the messenger said, but to say it states in a hadith. It's said in a hadith. In the narration, it says. And Allah surely knows best. Last question is coming from Initials EC, Stuttgart, Germany. Is it permissible to talk to sisters outside in public or in the mosque to ask them if they're interested in marriage? As long as you're not secluded with them, you're dressed properly, they're dressed properly, you have a sincere intention, you have an agenda, you have an objective to get to the point, then that's one thing. It's not haram to speak to someone who isn't your mahram. In the Quran, many verses talk about non-mahrams speaking with each other. A woman who's leaving one marriage who wants to remarry, which you cannot say to her specifically, and the iddah versus you using an explicit hints. Inni fi mithliki laraghibun. I'm looking for a woman like you. You're not allowed to say, I want to marry you when your iddah is over. I'm looking for what? A sister like you. I've been looking what? I've been waiting what? Right? A girl like you, right? Now, that's one thing. So if that's a woman in that state, then what do you think about a woman who isn't married? You asking her that question. That's the point I'm trying to prove. Is that it is not haram to speak to a non-mahram woman. That's the point. With the conditions. And with the proper adab and in the proper agenda. Chitter chatter, weasel words, just blah, 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 blah. Versus, Assalamu alaikum, look, give your pops my number, huh? Tell him it's me. You understand? That's one thing, right, Sheikh? It's not prohibited to have what? To have some game. It's not prohibited, Jabbar, right? Wise man, what? One said, there's nothing wrong with being smooth. That's fine, right? But you can't just sit there and just talk for 10, 15 minutes, laughing and joking, right? And then, lie to the point. What's up? Blah, 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 blah. No, yes, my father, wakil, khalas. All right? And Allah Azza wa Jalla surely knows best. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance and for forgiveness and for firmness upon the truth until the day in which we meet Him and stand in front of Him. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam wa barak ala abdihi wa rasulihi nabiyina wa imamina Muhammad.